Enough treating the Chargers like some polite little promise. This team has already won 11 games twice under Harbaugh, but now the standard has changed. January or nothing. Mike McDaniel just walked into Los Angeles and put real heat on this offense, calling for a serious jump from the receivers. There is a massive trade idea floating around Justin Herbert's weapons. The offensive line battle is getting ready to drag everybody out of their comfort zone. And even the national rankings are starting to admit what Chargers fans already know. Los Angeles has a core that can swing with anybody. Hit that like button because today is all pressure. And that pressure starts exactly where it should, the offense. Because you cannot look at Justin Herbert, look at 2 straight wildcard exits, and then pretend this gets solved with nice little speeches about trusting the process. The Chargers have already shown they can win in the regular season. Back-to-back 11-win seasons under Jim Harbaugh are not some small thing. But the bar has moved. Now the gap between this team and full respect comes down to whether this offense can show up in January with teeth, speed, and real production. And that is why Mike McDaniel's message matters so much. He did not come to Los Angeles to protect anybody's feelings. When he says it is a reasonable expectation for every receiver in that room to beat his career highs, that is a straight message to the locker room. There is no more space for sleeping potential. Ladd McConkey already has a high bar, with career bests of 1,149 yards and 10 touchdowns. Quentin Johnston has 735 yards and 8 touchdowns. Trey Harris is still building with 324 yards and 1 touchdown. Darius Davis and Keandre Lambert-Smith have smaller numbers, but that is exactly why they belong in this conversation too, because there is room to grow. The aggressive read is simple. McDaniel is putting the entire group right in front of the mirror. You cannot just say this team is missing a proven name if the guys already in the building are not squeezing every ounce out of their own talent. Did the fan base want a major receiver from the outside? I understand it. Herbert deserves serious firepower. But McDaniel came from an environment in Miami where skill players put up huge numbers. And now he is looking at this roster like, I can pull more out of this group, but you better be ready for the standard. Brennan Thompson is the explosive piece in this puzzle. He led the SEC with 1,054 yards in 2025, and he brings the kind of speed that can stress coverage in a hurry. David Njoku changes the math too. A veteran tight end who can threaten the middle of the field pulls attention, freezes safeties, opens windows, and keeps defenses from squeezing the wide receivers the same way. So no, this is not just some motivational quote from a new coordinator. This is the first public test of the Chargers' 2026 offense. McDaniel is saying loud and clear, this room will be judged by production. And honestly, that is exactly how it should be. If Los Angeles wants to stop hearing that Herbert has to carry everything by himself, somebody in this receiver room has to turn opportunity into explosion. And now we get to a conversation I know divides the fan base, but it cannot be shoved under the rug. If McDaniel is demanding explosion from this group, how far should Joe Hortiz go to give Herbert an immediate impact receiver? Because challenging Ladd, Johnston, Harris, Thompson, and the rest of that room is one thing. Looking across the AFC, seeing the heavy hitters that show up in January, and acting like good intentions alone are going to beat Buffalo, Kansas City, Baltimore, or any defense that tightens the field when the game gets big, that is something else entirely. Jake Beckman from Fansided put a huge name into this conversation, DK Metcalf. And this is a strong idea because it is not timid. The thought is that the Chargers could go after a physical, vertical receiver with true number 1 presence, someone who could pair with Ladd McConkey and make this passing game much harder to defend. Metcalf is coming off a season with 59 catches, 850 yards, and 6 touchdowns, leading the Steelers' receiver group in those categories. That is not just a decoration piece. That is a player who changes the way a defense lines up before the ball is even snapped. And let's not be afraid to say it. Justin Herbert with DK Metcalf attacking outside would be a real problem for any defensive coordinator. You want to roll safety help over the top? Fine. Now McConkey has more space to work inside. Njoku can punish the intermediate areas. The run game gets more room to breathe. You want to leave him one-on-one? Then you are betting your corner can handle size, strength, speed, and the deep ball against a quarterback who has the arm to punish even one late step. That is not empty fantasy. That is a real aggressive offensive fit. The heavy part is the price. Metcalf has a big contract with a cap hit around $31 million in 2026 as part of that $132 million deal. But Los Angeles has space. The projection cited has the Chargers around $45 million in cap space for this season and $79 million in 2027. So the question stops being, can they pay for it? And turns into, is it worth paying for? And that is the real fight. Because if the Chargers believe McDaniel can elevate the players already on this roster, maybe they protect their draft capital and avoid forcing the market. But if the start of the season shows this offense is missing that X-receiver who makes defenses change the entire plan, Hortiz cannot act like Herbert has unlimited time to wait on development. The window is open. Harbaugh has already pushed this team into a winning standard. McDaniel is here to speed it up. If Pittsburgh decides to listen, the Chargers have to at least walk into the room and hit the table. Not to please the internet, to send the message that actually matters. Herbert is not walking into another playoff fight carrying the offense by himself. And if the DK Metcalf conversation is the kind of topic that catches fire on the outside, this next battle is the kind that wins games in the ugly silence of the trenches. Everybody loves talking about explosive receivers, big trades, famous names, but the truth is brutal. If the offensive line turns into chaos, McDaniel's entire plan loses its bite. There is no creative offense when Herbert is taking pressure up the middle before the route can even develop. There is no serious season if the line depth collapses at the first real physical problem. That is why this Logan Taylor versus Alex Harkey battle deserves real attention. The Chargers made a clear effort to rebuild offensive line depth. Tyler Biadasz comes in to replace Bradley Bozeman at center. Cole Strange enters as a piece for the right side. Jake Slaughter and Trevor Penning are in the fight on the left side. But this roster has 14 offensive linemen, and when it is time to cut that number down to 9 or 10, somebody is getting left behind. At that point, nice resume lines, potential stories, and maybe later talk will not save anybody. Harbaugh is going to want the guy who can put the helmet on and survive right now, and that is where Logan Taylor looks like he has the edge. Harkey came from college after playing almost everything at right tackle. His natural projection is a move inside to guard because of his body type and lateral limitations. The issue is, moving inside is not just sliding over and pushing a defensive tackle. Inside, everything happens in a phone booth. No space, immediate contact, violent hands, short angles, no patience for mistakes. Lance Zierlein's NFL.com scouting report pointed out that Harkey needs real work with patience and consistent positioning at guard. That matters. Taylor, meanwhile, has already lived that transition. He started out at tackle, but at Boston College, he played 1,218 snaps between the two guard spots over his final 2 seasons. That does not guarantee him a roster spot, but it gives him an objective advantage. He knows the mess inside. He understands how fast the game hits. He also brings versatility and strong athletic testing from the combine, something that should get McDaniel's attention because this offense needs linemen who can move, adjust angles, and avoid becoming statues waiting for contact. My aggressive read is this: for offensive line depth, a pretty ceiling cannot beat readiness. Harkey may have an interesting path. His physical upside may tempt the coaching staff. But if the question is who is closer to helping if an injury forces the Chargers to change the lineup in the middle of the season, Taylor has the stronger case right now. And I want to hear from the fan base. Would you keep the roster spot for the player who is more ready, or would you bet on the bigger upside? Because in this battle, the mistake does not show up on the highlight reel. It shows up when Herbert takes a clean shot. And that point about protection leads straight into a story way too many people outside the building took too long to see. The Chargers are not an old roster trying to squeeze out one desperate final run. They have a strong young core, a real one that can support a competitive window for years. And I'm going to be very direct. That destroys the lazy talk that Los Angeles is just Justin Herbert and hope. No, there is structure being built here. There is young talent at positions that matter. There is a foundation that, if handled the right way, can bother the AFC for a long time. Christopher Knox from Bleacher Report ranked the Chargers 6th in the NFL in young cores. 6th. And among AFC teams, only New England was ahead of them on that list. That is not a small detail. That is national recognition that Jim Harbaugh's rebuild is not getting stuck on short-term patches. Even though the most recognizable name after Herbert is Khalil Mack, who is 35, the full picture is much younger than a lot of people realize. Start with Herbert himself. He is still only 28. For an elite quarterback, that is not the end of a prime. That is command territory. And around him, the offense has names that carry the future. Ladd McConkey as an impact receiver, Oronde Gadsden at tight end, Omarion Hampton in the backfield, plus young pieces in the trenches that can define the physical identity of this attack. The Chargers opened last season as the 7th youngest team in the NFL, dealt with multiple injuries along the offensive line, and still made the playoffs again. That says something about the base. On defense, the process may still look more developmental, but do not confuse development with emptiness. Tuli Tuipulotu is only 23, and he has already become a piece that changes the energy of the pass rush. Tarheeb Still is also 23 and has shown promise at corner. Akeem Messidor, the first-round pick, enters older for a rookie at 25, and that created discussion. Fair enough, but one older draft pick does not erase the bigger roster picture. The final read on this story is simple and aggressive. If the Chargers have one of the best young cores in the league, the excuses are over. You cannot sell the future forever. A good future has to become big wins. Herbert is in the right window. Harbaugh has already set the standard. McDaniel is here to pull production out of this offense. Now Los Angeles has to stop being praised as an interesting team and start being treated like a real threat. At the end of the day, every one of these stories lands in the same place. The Chargers have weapons, youth, coaching, a quarterback, and more than enough reasons to stop accepting a supporting role. McDaniel is demanding production from the receivers. The DK Metcalf idea shows Herbert could still get even more firepower. The offensive line battle is serious because protection is not a luxury. And this young core is already being ranked among the best in the league, so now it is simple. Turn respect into fear. If you believe 2026 has to be the year this team flips the script in January, subscribe, drop your comment, and stay right here, because this season is going to demand a loud fan base.